Tonight what we're going to do is we're going to talk about honoring God. And what does it mean? What does it look like to honor God? Now, there's a verse in that portion of scripture that Ciara read, that when I was just kind of thinking about this conversation and just studying for it, really stood out for me. And I'm like, wait, let me just pause on this. And that was 1 Samuel 2, verse 30. And I'm just going to read the second part for now. And this is what God says. He says, those who honor me, I will honor. Those who honor me, I will honor. And those who despise me, we might, in context of what we're talking about, say, those who dishonor me, those who despise me, shall be lightly esteemed. Lightly esteemed. And so the context of this is, these words are said to a man named Eli. Now, Eli is the high priest at this time. And so what the high priest does was, the high priest had this role, was he needed to represent the people before God. And so he would take the people's burdens and their cries and their needs to God. But he was also a representative of God to the people. And so his job was also to take, to show the people and to teach the people who God was and God's way and what God is saying about whatever situation they're going through for the nation. So he was this middleman between God and the people of Israel. In biblical language, we would say he was a mediator. So he would mediate between God and the people. And so he had this immense privilege, this immense responsibility of representing God to the people, teaching people who God was and his ways, and then at the same time, knowing the burdens and the cries of the people and taking that to God to receive answers and direction, and to plead on their behalf when they sinned. He would go on their behalf before God to offer sacrifices for forgiveness. But it wasn't just the high priest. The high priest, it was the role and the responsibility of the whole priesthood, right? So he was the high priest, he was in charge, but the priesthood was made up. The priesthood was made up of other priests, and part of this priesthood were his sons, and so his sons and all the Levites were part of the priesthood. They were part of the tribe of Levi, and their sole role in the nation of Israel, they were the people that were the priests that represented God to the people and the people to God. But when we read 1 Samuel 2, we see that it tells us that Eli's sons were corrupt and they did not know God. Right? They were corrupt and they didn't know God. And then it goes on to explain a bunch of things. And essentially, just to give a summary view, what it was saying was, in other words, they would use their priestly role, they would use their authority as priests to take advantage of the people as they came to worship from God. So people were coming there to worship, to make sacrifices to God, and Eli's sons would use their authority to take from the people, essentially steal from the people, but not just from the people, because they were stealing what the people were bringing to give to God. So they were essentially stealing from God. They were using their authority for their own gain. And they were doing all sorts of things, not just stealing from the sacrifices, but it goes on to how they would sleep with the woman that would come to the tent and all these things. And so they were doing all these things evil. And in short, what they were doing is they were misrepresenting God to the people. They weren't representing God accurately to the people. So they were exploiting their priestly position. And it gets so bad that the whole nation of Israel, they get fed up and they're complaining to Eli, the high priest, like, your priests, and who also happen to be your sons, are just out of hand right now. Like, it's getting too much right now. And so Eli hears this, and we see Eli is not partaking with them, and he even goes and he rebukes his sons, and he says, you know what you're doing, like, please tone it down. Like, this is getting too much for me. But we see he does nothing about it. He doesn't remove them. He doesn't stop them. He rebukes them with words. He doesn't agree with their actions, but he does nothing about it. He does nothing to stop them. And he was the person who had the authority. If there was anyone who had authority to stop them, it was Eli, as the high priest and as their father. And so it's in this context that we read that verse where God says, I will honor those who honor me, and those who despise me will be lightly esteemed. And then it goes on, and the rest of the passage goes on to what's going to happen to Eli's family. And so Eli's entire household gets judged. Eli's entire household suffers because they were dishonoring God. Because Eli's sons were dishonoring God in their position. They were misrepresenting God to the people. They were using their position in evil and corrupt ways. And so, in short, they had no honor, no care for their position that God had given them as priests. And so the entire household gets judged. And not just the sons, but even Eli. Because although Eli didn't agree with his sons, although he even verbally opposed them, notice his actions, he did nothing to stop them. Because honoring is not just words. In fact, honoring is very much linked to actions. You can honor someone with your words, but if you don't honor them with your actions, it's still dishonor. And so you can do evil by doing nothing. You can do wrong by doing nothing. Sometimes we think dishonor is about what I say or what I do, but sometimes dishonor is just as much about what you don't say and what you don't do. Sometimes dishonor is just as much about what you allow to happen around you, what you allow to happen in your own life. And so Eli was silent in the face of the corruption. And when you are silent in the face of corruption that you have the power to do something about, you're just as guilty. And so our actions, or our lack of them, reveal what we truly honor. And so in the New Testament reality, Jesus is now our high priest. And so Jesus now represents takes our burdens, our needs, our concerns, and he represents them to the Father in heaven. And he also represents the Father to us here on earth. That's what Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you know me, you know the Father, because I and the Father are one. But a priesthood is not just the high priest. The priesthood is made up of the high priest and all the priests that serve under the high priest. And so in the New Testament reality, if Jesus is now the high priest, who are the priests? The rest of the priests that make up the priesthood. And the hint, it's not just the pastors of the world. It's not just the people that work at churches. It's not just the youth leaders of the world. Every believer, every Christian. And so if you're a believer, each and every one of you have been made a priest. You're part of the priesthood of God. Meaning you have a responsibility to take the burdens and the needs of the people before God and to represent God and who he is and his ways to the people around you. And so we all have this responsibility. In the letter of Peter, we told that Peter referenced it when we're in our difference makers leaders. We are a chosen nation, a royal priesthood. And it goes on and says, a holy nation, a chosen people, God's royal priesthood. I'm messing up the verse now. But the key there is we are a royal priesthood. And so we have this responsibility, this privilege to be priests, to help reconcile people back to God. So we don't want to be like Eli and his sons. We don't want to just take this role for granted. We don't want to use this role in corrupt ways. We don't want to dishonor God in the role that he's given us as priests. See, what happens when you dishonor God is your heart begins to harden. And the more you dishonor God, and this is true for even people, your heart hardens towards people when you dishonor them. But when you dishonor God, when you're not honoring towards God, your heart hardens and it continues to harden. And what eventually happens is consequences follow. So I don't have it on my screen, but in Romans 1, I want to show you how this happens in real time. In Romans 1, I'm going to start verse 20. And this is what it says. It says this. Because although they knew God, right? All of us, I think, and if not, then, hey, that's cool, I'm glad you, but most of us, I think, claim to know God. We claim to be believers, we claim to be Christians. So it says, because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful. Right? So in short, they didn't honor God. They did not glorify him as God. They were not thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Their hearts were darkened. Their hearts were hardened. And so professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creepy things. And then it says, therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their heart, to dishonor their bodies among themselves. And then in verse 26, it says this again, for this reason, because they dishonored God, because they did not honor God, God gave them up to vile passions, for even the woman exchanged natural use for what is against nature. And then skip down to verse 8, and it says this, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them up to a debased mind. In other words, a mind that was becoming worse and worse, a corrupted mind. I think for some of us, we feel like, as long as God doesn't punish me for what I do, then it means whatever I'm doing is okay. Like, as long as God doesn't take away health, wealth, and peace, then he obviously is okay with whatever I'm doing. But the scariest judgment of God, the scariest judgment God can give is almost when he puts up his hand and says, all right, have it your way. Like if this is what you want, I'll fully withdraw myself and leave you to the desires of your heart. This is what it's speaking about to these people in Romans 1. Their hearts had become so hard because of their lack of honor and towards God that God had just almost withdrawn himself. It said he gave them up. In other words, meaning God literally just stood back, put his hands up and said, I will give you over to what you want so badly. And so when there's no honor in our heart towards God, our hearts harden and consequences follow, and God almost puts his hands back and steps back. And so I don't want this to be any of us. I don't want any of us to fall into that Romans 1 verse 12 category. So we need to honor God, but how do we honor God in a very practical way? What does it look like very practically to honor God? In John 14 verse 15, it says, these are the words of Jesus. He says, if you love me, keep my commands. Just 7 words, but powerful. If you love me, keep my words. So how do we honor God? How do we love God? We obey. As preachers, we like to say God's love language is obedience. Right? If you love me, keep my commands. Some versions will say, if you love me, you will keep my commands. And so we honor God by following his word, by doing what he instructed. But where do we start? Because God has a lot to say about a lot. Right? Like, there's a lot that God has to say about a lot. And so tonight we're going to start with the 10 Commandments. Why? Because when God had to take the nation of Israel out of captivity, and he chose them to now be his nation of priests to the world, he had to train them. He had to mold them. He had to teach them what it meant to be a priest. He had to teach them who he was and his ways so that they could be faithful priests. And so to do this, he takes them on this journey. And one of the first things he does is he gives them these things that we call the 10 Commandments. And so we're just going to go through the first 4 tonight. And hopefully by the end of next week, we're all going to know the 10 Commandments off by heart. If there's anyone who can give me the 10 off by heart right now, I'll give them a chocolate. Now people are locked in. Okay. Don't worry. Maybe after next week, I'll do the test again. And if you can name all 4 off by heart, you'll get a chocolate. All right. Or 10. We're only going to do 4 tonight, or 10. All right, let's start in Exodus 20, verse 2. So Exodus 20, verse 2 says, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. All right, so this is important. This is God's intro just before he gives us the 10 Commandments. So we don't want to miss this, because this intro is meant to frame how we think about all the 10 Commandments that are about to follow. Right? So notice, let's just take that first line. I am the Lord your God. So that word your, that's a very personal, that's a covenantal, that's a intimate relational language that God is using here. Right? Because before we get to the 10 Commandments, before we talk about the 10 Commandments, you first have to settle that I am God's and God is mine. Like, you got to settle that first in your heart. That's got to be rock solid, because if that is not solid, then the 10 Commandments are just going to be a bunch of rules that you just like, why am I learning this? Why do I have to follow this? What does this really even matter? Because you can either view the 10 Commandments as just a set of rules that you have to live by, or you can look at the 10 Commandments as the words of your Father. You can look at the 10 Commandments as the words not only of your Father, but also your Creator, giving you a guide as to how to live your life according to the way he designed you. And so the 10 Commandments aren't about restricting freedom. The 10 Commandments are about allowing you to, or teaching you how to walk on the narrow road that leads to freedom and life. And so we've got to have that in our mind first before we view the 10 Commandments. So let's start. Let's get into the 4 Commandments. But before we do that, hopefully it's going to work. I actually brought a video that's hopefully going to teach us the 4 Commandments, and then we're going to try to learn them again and speak about them briefly. So the media guys can hit the video. Oh, no sound. All right, that would have been so much cooler with noise. I won't lie, with audio. But anyway, hopefully you guys could all read. So commandment 1, everyone stick up your hand and just stick up a 1, all right? This one's the easiest one to remember, right? Commandment 1, Exodus 20 verse 30, you shall have no other gods before me, right? There's only one God, right? So that idea, you shall have no other gods before me. That idea before me carries many meanings. It can mean you must have no other gods in front of me. You must have no other gods next to me. You must have no other gods against me, like fighting against me, fighting for the position of God in your life. You must have no other God next to me. So it can mean all of that before me can mean all of those things. And so the idea, that the core idea is there must be no room in your heart for at any moment, at any time, for anything else to take the position of God. What does it mean for something to be God in your heart? I was watching a reel the other day, and this person was interviewing two people, and they were interviewing the one atheist. So they asked the atheist the question, do you need God to make sense of life? Do you need God to make sense of reality? So the atheist is like, no, the short answer, no, not at all. So then the interviewer turned to the next person and asked them the same question, do you need God to make sense of life? Do you need God to make sense of reality? And I love the answer. They said, God is whatever you make sense of life with, or reality. In other words, what you're saying is, whatever you use, because there is something you use in to make your daily decisions, if there wasn't, you would be falling apart and you would be all over the place because you would have no way of making decisions. So what you're saying is, whatever you use, whatever that might be, that determines how you make decisions and the behavior you have, that is God to you. That is God in your heart. So the question I like to ask is what are you loyal to? What commands your loyalty? Because whatever commands our loyalty is God in our hearts. What determines the decisions we make? What determines the choices, right, we make on a day-to-day basis? So this idea is, you shall have no other gods before me, is that there should be nothing else you're loyal to. We might think of scriptures like Matthew 6, seek first his kingdom, or seek his kingdom above all else. But even that idea of seek first or before me, it's not saying God needs to be number one in your priority list. Like if I had a piece of paper and I had to write out my priorities, number 1, God. Maybe number 2, make money. Maybe number 3, family. Number 4, I'll put schoolwork. Number 5, maybe we'll put friends. Maybe number 6, I'll put looks max in. Maybe number 8, I'll put soccer, right? So when God says you shall have no other gods before me, he's not saying just make sure I'm number 1 of your priority list. Because number 1 in a priority list is still fighting against number 2 and number 3 in that list. And so God's not saying, as long as you give me the majority of your time, the majority of your devotion, the majority of your love, the majority of your loyalty. So as long as it's God 51%, and then like the other 49% I can give to something else, I can give to my schoolwork. No, he's not saying number 1 on a list of priorities. What God is saying when he says you shall have no other gods before me, he says, I actually need to be the very piece of paper that you're writing the list on. So he's the very source from which the list comes. He's the very foundation upon which the list rests. So it's not 51%, it's 100%. It's everything. And so he has to be the foundation of our very life. He's not just, as long as I have him, and I give more time to him than I give to something else, then it's good. No, he's saying, I need to be the thing that determines how you do everything in your life. That's commandment 1. No other God before me, in short. Number 2. Right, I better go quick. My time's running out. Right, everyone hold up 2. Okay, now make the middle one, please, bow down. Just like that, if you can. We're going to see who's got good finger control. All right? Number 2 is simple. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth below, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down, so that's why we're bowing. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd generation and the 4th of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. This one's very simple, and it's very linked to number 1, so I'm going to go quick. What you worship in your heart will eventually show up in your life. And so whatever you worship in your heart as God, it will eventually have outward actions or outward ways in manifesting within your life. And it will take up your time and your energy and your attention and your focus. And so whatever is taking up your deepest attention, whatever is concerning you the most, that's a good sign of what is perhaps serving as God in your heart. And God's very simple. He says you cannot serve 2 masters. Right? You cannot serve 2 masters. You will hate the one, you will love the other. You'll be devoted to the one, you'll despise the other. Obedience to one will mean disobedience to the other. Okay, commandment 3. Everyone go 3. This is almost like Hunger Games style. Just put it to your lips. Take it, put it to your lips. All right, commandment 3, Exodus 20, verse 7. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Bless you, MZ. You shall not take the name of your Lord your God in vain. This is more than just using God's name and like saying Jesus or oh my God in a casual, flippant sense. Like, yes, you shouldn't do that, so I'm not giving you permission to go do that. But it's more than that. The idea of you shall not take the name of the Lord. To take, it's the idea of you mustn't carry. Right? That idea of to take is to carry something. So when you think about it, as a Christian, if you profess with your mouth to be a Christian, the moment you do that, you now carry the name of God. You're now carrying the name of God as a Christian. And yeah, so you're carrying the name of God. And you know, the biggest, I'm not saying the biggest, but the atheist out there saying Christianity is hocus pocus is not really a threat or doing anything against Christianity. It's the people that are saying they're Christian, that confess they're Christian, that carry in the name of God, but are living like devils, that are hurting, that are turning people away from the faith more than anyone else. See, we are called, in Corinthians we are told we are ambassadors for Christ. So when an ambassador is someone who's sent into a foreign country to represent their country. And an ambassador knows that now that I'm representing my country in this foreign country, my words don't just reflect on me. They reflect on my country. My actions don't just reflect on me. They reflect on my country. What I do and say can cause this nation that I'm in to view my nation in a certain way and maybe even go to war or have peace or have trade. My words, my actions carry weight. When you're a Christian, when you walk around with the title of Christian, you are carrying the name of God. That means your words reflect on God. Your actions reflect on God to the people around you. And so our lifestyles must match our confession. That idea of vain. Vain simply means something that doesn't achieve its purpose. That's what it means. Vain means something that does not complete what it was meant to complete. And so when our lifestyle doesn't match our confession, right, but we claim to be Christians, we are carrying God's name, but we're carrying it in vain. We're not fulfilling the purpose upon which we are meant to carry the name. Because remember, we are called to be priests and ambassadors to the people around us. So a very quick question to ask: if someone had to view your life and just watch you for a whole week, but you're not going to say anything to them, they're almost like a fly on the wall, and for a whole week they're just going to watch your life. That's my time to say I'm up, so I'm almost there. If they were just to watch your life for a whole week without you saying anything, right, to watch your actions, not your words, would they conclude at the end of it, that person's a Christian? They follow Jesus. All right, last one for tonight. Number 4. Everyone hold up a number 4. Almost make like a pillow, like you're about to go to sleep. Yeah, don't actually fall asleep on me. You can almost... All right, number 4. Exodus 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your sons, nor your daughters, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who's within your gates. For 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Very simply, Sabbath, quite literally, Sabbath means to rest. I'm not to rest, to stop. And so Sabbath was a day of stopping. It was a day where you would stop whatever you're doing, you would stop work to rest, to refocus your attention, to refocus yourself back onto God. And so for the nation of Israel, this was a literal day. There was a literal day where the entire nation would just stop. Everything would come to a stop. And the whole nation would just take that day to turn all their attention, all their love, all their devotion back onto God and to rest back in the truth and the knowledge of God. Now, in the New Testament, we are told Jesus is now our Sabbath rest. Meaning, we don't have to wait for a day to stop and rest. You don't have to wait for Sunday or Friday night to be refreshed by the presence of God. Jesus now is your Sabbath rest. And so the question we need to ask ourselves is, am I resting in Jesus, or am I just numbing myself? Am I just distracting myself? Am I just going to something to provide a little bit more comfort? Or am I resting in Jesus? Because when we honor God, it leads to a rested life. When we honor God with our heart, have no other God before me. When we honor God with our energy, do not bow down or serve idols. When we honor God with our lifestyle, don't take his name in vain. And when we honor God with our time, because perhaps the hardest thing in today's world, more than anything else, is to honor God with our time, right? But we can't say, I can't pray or I can't spend time in God's word, but my screen time is 3 hours. Or I can't come to church on a Sunday because I have schoolwork to do, but I'll go out and spend the night out with friends that same week. And so when we honor God with our time, we honor God with our energy, our lifestyle, and our heart, it results in the rested life that God has for us, not a restless one. And so honoring God is, when we honor God, we live the life that he designed us to live in rest. And so I want to invite each one of you, if you're feeling restless, if you feel like your life has not had rest and things are just chaos and exhaustion and one thing after another, maybe just go back to the simple question of, how am I honoring God with my heart? Is he God in my heart and the only one? Am I giving my energy to things that are idols? Is my lifestyle matching the lifestyle that I'm meant to live as one who carries his name? And lastly, am I honoring him with my time? How am I using my time for him? And if you just focus on those 4 things, making sure he's guarding your heart, that you're giving all your energy to him and the things he's called you to do. Right? I'm not saying don't do your schoolwork or don't give energy to your schoolwork. School is not a guard of your heart, I can guarantee you. But you're giving your energy to him. Your lifestyle matches the one you are meant to be carrying. And your time is being given to him. You'll begin to feel more rested. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but the more you get those 4 things right, you'll be honoring God. And by honoring God, you will find yourself in the rested life.